We all have to deal with strong emotions. And yet, if you're an entrepreneur, you also have to figure out doing business anyway. If you're running a business, well, wait, really, if you are the business, then inevitably you're going to run into moments when life happens. You will have to both run your business and deal with the unpleasant reality that our loved ones are born, they get married, they break bones, they have accidents, they die, and you have emotions around all of it. You'll move, you'll have arguments, break up. You'll miss planes, you'll get stranded, you'll encounter technology not working, you'll lose people and you'll need to train others. You'll get sick or have car trouble. You will have an old dog that needs care. All of those things will show you the leaks in your business. At least they did for me. I'm Deborah Atkinson. You're listening to Fitness Marketing Mastery, where usually I share marketing and sales strategies that are easy, enjoyable, even fun, so that you can feel you're building a business and the life that you want with the freedom to enjoy doing the things you love to do with the people you love to do them with without feeling sleazy, salesy, or pushy. And today we're going down a little side road. And if today maybe resonates a little bit and you're working on really building your business, but have less experience in the business part of it than you do in the training and the fitness part of it, stay tuned till the end and I'll tell you about how to catch a quick masterclass that might be helpful and give you some insight. You're going to have to make hard choices. And sometimes through all of that, you can't control your emotions. Recently, I've been going through a tough time. I'm talking about it here because of the opportunity that it's provided me to see what happens next for me or what I want to happen next for me in my business. And I also realized that much of what I default to doing myself in my business is not actually moving my business forward as much as it's a distraction and it's a comfort to leftover feelings of fear that may not be justified anymore in this moment. This is all about having strong emotions and doing business anyway. So I feel like I need to give you a little bit of backstory about what it is that I've been going through. So I don't often on this podcast get quite so personal, but I'm going to because this is the moment I'm in. One of the last trips that I had to see my mom wasn't all that pleasant. She had struggled after a fall. And literally, I'll back up even further. So, for 37 years, I've been talking about fitness. And the older I've got and the more experience and knowledgeable I got about fitness and what happens to the aging population, the more I realize the typical downhill spiral as I work with so many people with osteoporosis and sarcopenia. And sarcopenia did not used to be a household word, but it is now. What happens typically is that older adults lose their strength, they get more frail, they get vulnerable, and then inevitably there's going to be a fall. And because their bones are not very strong, they will likely fracture. And when they fracture, they will have more bed rest. When they have more bed rest, they will lose more strength and more lean muscle mass rapidly. The difference between 3 days of hospital bed convalescing for a 90-year-old versus a 20-year-old is would rattle you. So I mean it's the difference between say a loss of 3 pounds of lean muscle mass in a frail older person. So imagine that versus like a dismal point, almost nothing in a 20 something. And yet, that devastating 3 pounds that even the 20 something might be able to gain back it's going to be very difficult for the 90 something to gain back. And so I watched that happen to my mother. The end of June, she fell. And from then, she was convalescing in the nursing home, not moving much. They weren't actually coming in even every day to get her up. And that was driving me nuts. So there she went, weaker, more frail, feeling more vulnerable, as if she was going to fall, and every bit as stubborn as ever. So, out in the hallway reaching for something, there's probably three aides around. She fell because she didn't ask for help. She reached for it herself. And that again reinforced that to her, she was much more vulnerable. And so again, we saw this downward spiral. So she would move less and was not really getting up to move much at all, except to get off of her chair, get into the bed, out of the bed, go to the bathroom. And that, my friends, is how it happens. So weaker and weaker, less and less muscle. And eventually she kept having small falls on her own and even in the presence of others again. And we found out she had a brain bleed. And whether that was caused by something, one of the falls, or not, no one knows. But a brain bleed is something that you can't do anything about except brain surgery. During COVID, there wasn't a hospital bed to be had in this state of Iowa, a surgical bed. And even so, at 95, number one, if she would have chosen it, we would have had a tough decision. I don't think she would have chosen it for herself, and we would have had to decide. But she would have been last on a list that would have gotten a surgical bed anyway. So we didn't have to make the decision, but and I will say she also wasn't in any pain, but she was confused because of the bleed. So it was pushing on parts of her brain that help with memory recognition. And she was aware enough to know she was confused, but frustrated by the fact she didn't know why she was confused, but yet no pain. So as the days went on, she was mostly in bed. She was not up, and then less and less awareness or cognition at all. So that's kind of what my family and I were going through in these last couple of months. And whether you're right there every day with that burden or you're like me, states away and not there, and you have that burden, there's no winning in this race. It's just what it is. But that began to be the distraction that I had. And in the past 4 weeks, I've been on a plane 4 different times. One to go there, where I was fortunate enough to see her and hold her hand and look in her eyes one last time. And, a couple more for business trips. And then just recently away for her services and back. And so it's been a moment in time, and nothing prepares you personally for that kind of emotion. But again, I am the business like you. If you are the coach, the personal trainer, you're building a business or want to, and it's your bread and butter, it's your retirement, it's your future, it's your legacy. This is something that you can't just park it. You can't just take 2 weeks off. You can't just have someone else step in and have them get a temp. You're at the top of all the food chain and you make all the decisions, and it either goes up or it comes down, but it's you behind them all. So that's my moment, right? So, what I want you to know is that underlying all things through the journey of your business, when you start, when you're in the middle, when you're growing, when you're toward the end and a different kind of a legacy, there is a journey that you'll go through, but there are layers of this kind of life instance that will go on top of it. So at the beginning of my business, I had fears in the beginning. I definitely had fears about my business, and for good reason, really. I got down to very little money in my bank account when I started over at 49 from a very, very comfortable living that I was making in the middle of the Midwest with zero debt and plenty of assets. My house at that point was for sale, but there were no buyers, and it was 20 below and too near Christmas for anybody really wanting to buy. And it was then that I learned the habits that I've kept for longer than they serve me. I roll up my sleeves. I go to work and I make things happen. I make things happen, right? I'll say that. And here's why that's important. It gives you a sense of control, and it is possible to make money by sending an email, even to a small list, to make things happen that didn't exist yesterday to sell something. And I did that. So, like you, maybe, which is why I say I tend to create things. The reality is that I've become the most successful by slowing down on my creating and by amplifying instead the marketing to the things I've already made. I have award winning content and programs that give rave reviews. So, what I really need is not another program, but I need more people in my programs. And maybe that's true of you as well. But we often default to our old patterns, right? At least until we break them. So I kept continuing to make things happen and really make things. So, next, most recently, what I'm dealing with my mom is the grief. My mother passed, and for the last couple of months, of course, it's been downhill. And we knew that it was on that accelerated path. I found myself not wanting to take care of other people, just wanting to take care of myself or be taken care of. And when you feel like this, you only have so much bandwidth to function. You're not likely to be able to take care of everyone else in the way that you usually do. Juggling things that normally are nothing are much harder. So if you keep having the same expectations of yourself, but you aren't able to have the same work habits that you usually do, it's going to create some friction for you. All of that leads to fatigue, can get really hard to take care of yourself, let alone a business. And this one must be the hardest of all to handle. It's unpredictable. It's not a fever, it's not a cold or the stomach flu. It's not the flight that you'll be mad about and then make up from. It's just grief comes in waves. So this is one of those things that you have to just learn to ride. And a lot of people went through this during the pandemic. I think it's a good thing to have to live through this now. For me, it gives me empathy. A lot of people lost loved ones they couldn't see, couldn't say goodbye to, not before they were gone and not even after they were gone. And they lost jobs. They lost life as they know it. A lot of us have lost pieces of that, but some really big pieces. And then what's happening right now? The holidays. If you're listening to this in real time, you have to think about the holidays. And I say that now because it's fresh on my mind. These will be the first holidays without my mom. And that's a fresh wound anyway. It's not the first holiday that I haven't been able to be with her. We all experienced that during COVID, and I'd had others too where that was true, but I'll be more alone at Christmas and at Thanksgiving without that phone call to make where, we pass the phone around the room and everybody speaks to that person who's missing from the table. What do you do during the holidays? How do you automate things during the holidays so you can be present, be where you want to be, and do the things you want to do? How do you promote during the holidays? It's really time to think about not just making things happen or attaching your success to how much money you're bringing in, which is definitely something that I've done in the past because I had to. I needed to know, am I covering my bills this month as I was beginning to build? But you want to think hard about how you're doing it. Are you bringing it in a way that is sustainable? You can continue to do that for months and years. And if you were to grow your business and just amplify it instead of more programs, you had the same program with more people. Could you handle that? Or are you building a business that you don't love and you don't necessarily want to keep doing? It's so important to consider your answer to that sooner rather than later. Otherwise, you'll paint yourself into a corner where you'll reach out for help, but often think, oh, this is a great idea, but I don't have time to do it. But you never will until you make that time. So if you're painted yourself into that corner, what you'll probably need to do is step back, make a lot less before you can make a lot more. I experienced that. I was making in the middle of a six-figure income in the middle of the Midwest. I mean, that's a really good living and very comfortable, and yet wanted to have more. So I had to pull way back, got to zero, got very, very uncomfortable, and then, though, can say that I've gone to six-figure months. Six-figure months when I had a few years there at the beginning that I wasn't making six figures a year. And so you've got to go through that growing pain. And here's the thing, had I not had time to pause, I may not have realized how much I've carried over habits that I began when business was very, very different from what it is now, so that I can build a sustainable business and do it with more thought. So, this little break that I've got right now, this break in really inability to focus and concentrate on the business as much as I had for the 7 years prior to it, would never have given me the wake up call that I was creating the kind of a life that really wasn't sustainable and that I don't want to continue. So the bottom line here is, the biggest takeaways from this episode are that business will have ups and downs. Even though you'll trend upward in your growth, if you're doing the right things, you will have some ups and downs. It's a lot like perimenopause. There are more predictable, usually, though I think we can agree the pandemic threw everybody for a loop. But more importantly, life will have ups and downs. The way I describe ideal workout planning for women in midlife is that there's a sweet spot of stress. So if you're in that sweet spot, you're primed for optimal fitness. It's not too little, it's not too much stress. So when your life changes, life's full of emotional stressors or financial ones, then your workouts can't be as much stress. So they have to back off a little bit. So the same is true of you for business. When you're struggling with a lot of emotional business stressors or financial business stressors, or maybe you've got this big physical activity goal that you're pursuing for yourself, it may not be in your best interest to push your business goals, to expect that you reached the same quota or surpassed it as you have before. Your business might plateau a little bit or it might dip, and sometimes that's okay. If you look at what's quality of life for you, what do you need? Are you still trending upward in the direction you want? At least you want it to be okay, right? You want to know where your space is for your break even or your burn rate. What is that? How much do you have to make to cover your bills? And then anything over and above that is profit. Every month I know how much my team expenses are going to be, and I know how much my equipment or my platform expenses will be, my advertising expenses, and I need to make at least that. And to be comfortable in the bank, in case there's another pandemic, there's something else that happens. You want like 6 months of that burn rate sitting there, just there. And then you operate with that there and available to you while you go on and do business. And hopefully your profit margin is much bigger than that normally. So you're continuing to grow and take some of that out and deposit it in a place where it will literally grow. If I've had a healthy couple of months with a really large profit margin, I might expect things to be a little quiet and then be okay about that, knowing that my average is still up. And fortunately, maybe that's what happened. So I've had a really good year. I've had a really good couple of months and some every month honestly in my past year has been a rock star, but a couple that were really standouts. And yet it was they that gave me the padding to say, it's okay because there's nowhere else I'm going to be right now than either my thoughts with my family or physically being with my family. And there's nothing more valuable than that. No profit margin, no bottom line, no board members saying, yeah, yeah, I don't have board members, but I'm sure that's what they would be like. So you've got to define your own level of success and your comfort level with what you can make, what you want to make, what that looks like for you. So I encourage you to think about those things now before it's too late. One of the things I would recommend you do as homework is sit down with a journal. For me, it's a blank yellow legal pad and a pen. Maybe for you, you like to do it on your iPad or your laptop, but sit down and really go through what is your ideal day? What's your ideal week look like? How much are you working? What things are you doing when you work that you actually love and look forward to doing? And make sure when you compare your today that you're headed in that direction, that it is starting to look that way. And then you know you're on the right track. If you're not quite making the revenue that you want, I mentioned earlier, I've got a special masterclass available on Thursday. You may want to drop in and learn a little bit more about midlife women and the mistakes we make in marketing to them and the mistakes we make in training them. If you haven't built your business around midlife women, you may want to think about it. And I've got a little training that you might be interested in. I'm going to put that in the show notes. And that show notes will be at fitnessmarketingmastery.com/doing business anyway. And what are you waiting for? The world needs you right now more than ever.